So, hello, I'm just letting the last few people in. I haven't put a how to rename yourself guide in the chat this time, but if you go to participants and click on the drop down, or wait a minute.
If you click on your video tile, 3 dots.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then click on more, and then you can choose to rename yourself if you want. We'll just give people a couple more minutes. So I think we're going to be a small but perfectly formed group tonight.
The weather.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Okay. So okay. So I think we'll start, and I'll try and let any latecomers in as they arrive. So welcome to this workshop about food and climate change. It's going to run from now until about 9 o'clock. Anytime you need to pop and get a drink or anything like that, please do. It has been put together by a group of low carbon groups, including my group, Low Carbon West Oxford, and we're calling ourselves the Communities for Zero Carbon Oxford. And some house rules, I did circulate these previously by email, but if I could ask everyone to mute their microphone, video on if possible, but note that we're recording this, so if that feels uncomfortable, or if you want some privacy, then obviously switch off. I think we're gonna have one breakout during Anaïs's session. It's not obligatory to go out into the breakouts. Obviously you're encouraged to go out, and we will do some voting at one point, and it's not a test, it's all anonymous, so no one will know whether you were right or wrong. And I'm likely to have some children and or a dog arrive at any moment, so I apologize in advance for that. Message me in the chat if you're not okay with, sometimes I do a screenshot or a photo of participants. I might ask you at the end to wave, but again, as I said, it's being recorded, so do switch off your camera if you're uncomfortable with that. Feel free to eat, drink, move around, whatever you need to do. There will be a short break at about 8:30, so yeah, but feel free to do what you need to do. Anything else? Anyone have anything they want to ask, or anything else they want to suggest at this point about ground rules? Okay, we'll carry on. So this evening's plan, we're going to hear from Susan Hutchinson from Low Carbon West Oxford, and she's a long-term volunteer with us, and she's going to be talking about the carbon emissions of different foods. And then Anaïs Bozatine from the Replenish project will be talking about ways to avoid waste. And then we'll have the short break I mentioned, and then Nina from Good Food Oxford will introduce you to some of their work, and I'll talk a bit about Low Carbon West Oxford's food work, and invite Ruth Lister, who's the school cook from West Oxford Primary, to talk about the cookery classes she was running before COVID interfered. And yes, questions on chats. There will be time at the end. We do finish with a short Q&A session, at the end. So I guess ideally main questions there, but yeah, feel free to seek clarification during it. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat. And yeah, we'll take it from there. Okay, so Susan.
Hi.
Let
Yes.
me see if I
Hope you
can.
see me.
I'm going to pin you,
Okay.
and maybe I'll spotlight you for everyone. I don't know what that will do.
Sounds very bad for everyone.
There you go. I've spotlit you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to talk about the carbon emissions of food on our plates. I'd like to make it just clear to start with that I'm not an academic expert on this. I did some work for Low Carbon West Oxford because I was so interested in it, and I wrote some of the early how to do a workshop on food. So I read up a lot about it. I'm not an academic expert on carbon emissions from food. So I want to make clear that, yes, it's my best attempt. Right. Anyway, next slide, please. The food production is about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It contributes hugely to to climate change. It's important to say two things. One, that all the figures are very, very approximate, difficult to calculate, uncertain, and probably disputed. So the orders of magnitude are going to be roughly right, but the detail is really, really, really difficult. So you will find various books with different figures, academic papers with different figures. This is just a distillation, and I have used a single book to make the figures I use later. How Bad Are Bananas? I've used this book so that my figures all come from the same source. So the wrongness will be the same for each food type, if you see what I mean. Okay, so if we could go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to now look at what the greenhouse gas emissions are more particularly, and then I'll look at the UK greenhouse gas emissions. And it's important at this point to say we talk about greenhouse gas emissions rather than CO2 because there are other emissions associated with food production, and these are methane, which is associated with what's technically known as enteric fermentation, which is just cows basically burping, and other food production such as dung, rice paddies, waste. So there's a lot of the greenhouse gases are not carbon. There is also methane, and there's also nitrous oxide, so soil bacteria, legume production, dung again, urine, nitrogen fertilizers, and these again are very strong emitters of carbon, of greenhouse gases. And finally, CO2, which is associated with various aspects of the food chain, but particularly transportation and particularly deforestation, so land use change, again, is also an emitter of carbon, CO2. So if I say carbon footprint, I'm really talking about a greenhouse gas emission footprint, AK. So carbon may be a shorthand, and in this, if when I use it, it will include other greenhouse gases as well. Okay, so that's a sort of breakdown of the things that happen to food. So production and initial processing, manufacturing, distribution, retail and cooking, and agriculturally induced land change. And so these are all broad categories of greenhouse gas emitting processes, if you like, that are associated with our food consumption. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. Okay, and so this is a more detailed, if you like, breakdown of what the greenhouse gas emissions are when you go from the raw ingredient. I mean, a shorthand way of looking at it is from plot to plate. That excludes quite a lot of food types. So any food that comes from the sea or won't be included in that picture, if you like. But these are the processes that get us from the raw ingredient to our plate when we eat. And so the biggest contributor there is agriculture. So you can see that the actual process of creating the food is a major emitter of greenhouse gases. I note that these figures exclude land use change. So this is particularly about deforestation, or when previously areas that were just wild have been cultivated. Early calculations were done without considering land use, and this has now started, this has been changed. I think it was in the Paris Agreement or a later one where there was a decision that it figures they would try and include land use change in the calculations that were done to see how damaging or not various food types are. Okay, so we're looking at agriculture, food manufacturing, it's 12%, and transport are 12%. So those are fairly intense uses, again, of emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. Packaging, again, and home food related, how we prepare the food, what we do with it when we get it home. Those are, so home food related, 10%. Then we've got catering, 6%. I'm trying retail, again, they're at the lower end, and a small amount for waste. We're not looking at waste. I think that figure is much bigger if you consider the whole gamut of food. I think that's waste from home. I'm not sure. I know Anais will come and talk a lot more about waste later. So that's a rough breakdown of the total journey of an item of food from plot to plate. It's very complicated how you do the calculations, as I've said, and very disputed. But I think there are some essential truths that can be extracted from this. So if we can look at the next slide, please. So there, I've got various foods, and I think there's going to be shortly a poll there that you can vote.
Yes.
And order these. Brilliant. Thanks, Mim.
Do you want to just describe what each thing is before we go to the vote?
Yeah, I was going to go through the pictures. Yes. Yeah. So in the top right, no, top left, there's the apples on a tree. That's a locally grown, locally picked apple. So that would be in September or whenever you went into your garden or onto your allotment or balcony and picked an apple off a tree. Underneath that, you've got tomatoes grown in a greenhouse. Below that, you've got half a dozen eggs. Below that, in the next column, there is hard cheese. Below that are shrimps. Then in the next column, bananas. In the next, and then below that is steak, beef steak. Then you've got locally grown tomatoes. Then in the final column, there is rice and New Zealand apples.
Great. Okay, so now I'm going to try and let's see if I can do this. I'm going to take you over. So if you go to menti.com, and some of you are already there. I can see people are already putting things in order. You can see people's votes coming in, so let me know if you haven't figured out how to find this, but you have to go onto Firefox or whatever web browser you use and go to menti.com and use this code at the top, which is 49446813, and there you will see that you're able to put things in order of which you think has the lowest emissions to the highest. So sorry, so 10th has the lowest and first has the highest. That's what I assume we're going for, because that's slightly ambiguous, but yeah, 10 lowest. 1
Is it lowest? I think it's lowest to highest, isn't it? Or
lowest.
Other people have done it. Okay.
Have I confused it?
With the lowest.
Sorry?
I was starting with the lowest. That's how it read to me. Is that no?
Yeah. So someone's asking for the code, so it's 49446813.
Could you tell me how to go to menti.com? Do I have to come out of Zoom?
Yeah, so you have to go to a web browser.
Okay, right.
And then you should be, so we're going from lowest to highest.
This is quite hard to choose, isn't it?
It's quite there's a large number of things on there.
Sorry.
So wait, Susan, just confirm with me. We're going for in first place, we want the lowest thing, and
I
in
would have
10th
said
place,
the first place was the lowest, yes.
okay, right. Sorry, I'm confusing people. Okay, we'll give people just another moment to vote or to order things because it's a bit.
Whoa.
Oh, some late shifting happening.
Yes. Oh, this is really good.
Okay, I think that's probably the majority have voted, in which case I will attempt to go back to the PowerPoint. And let Susan tell us the answers.
Right. So I think everyone got the locally grown apples. So those are very, very low. Particularly if you pick it off a tree in your garden, it's pretty much zero. You've probably done very little to the tree, and it requires almost no effort whatsoever. Okay, I don't know how many people knew that apples from New Zealand come next. It may be surprising. Shipping has a very low, is associated with low greenhouse gas emissions. And so anything that travels slowly by ship is fine, is considered, low. And it's actually better out of season to get apples from New Zealand because they've grown with very little in the way of inputs, if you like. So if you put something in the ground and it just grows, then its carbon footprint, its greenhouse gas emissions associated with it are going to be low. So an English apple that you buy in, I don't know, April, will have been stored somewhere cold, which has required cooling. And so the storage of food contributes quite a lot to the its carbon footprint, its the greenhouse gas emissions associated with it. So it's better to buy food that has arrived by ship that is grown locally somewhere else, if that makes sense, than buying English apples, even though they were grown here. If they've been stored for long periods, then it's the storage that contributes hugely.
Although Nina from Good Food Oxford makes the point in the chat that container shipping is still harmful in terms of particle emissions and ocean noise pollution.
There are other, yes, exactly.
So
there
it
are other
depends what we,
associated
yeah,
costs with it.
yeah.
But compared with air freight, anything air freighted is off the scale. And so, yes, so if you have to air freight something, then it's just going to enormously increase its carbon footprint. And I think it would be very, very helpful if the transportation means were shown on items that we imported, so that we couldn't avoid air freighted. That would be one of the things I would like to see. I'd like to know how things have arrived.
Tina's asking in the chat if apples aren't they stored on the boat, refrigerated on the boat?
Less so, and I think they're often not picked completely ripe, and so they ripen as they come over. So certainly in How Bad Are Bananas, the book by Tim Berners-Lee, I mean, there is a higher cost. I mean, there are more emissions associated with them. So it's not no cost, but compared with cooling it, I think the ships do it in such a way that it's not too bad compared with inefficient. I mean, if the places that were cooled in this country were cooled using renewable sources of energy, then arguably that would be better. But if they're cooled using fossil fuels, then I think it's still better to have them from somewhere where they just grow and shipped over. Or you could choose to eat fruit that is local, but in the winter we would struggle to find locally sourced fruit, I think, apart from perhaps rhubarb for some parts of the year. So all of this is a balance, and the need to eat a healthy diet is also a factor. So there are other non-carbon factors associated with our food choices, which we have to acknowledge. And we have to, you know, there's a lot embodied in what the food is we choose that isn't just about the planet. There's a lot of emotion, and telling people what they can and can't eat, again, is not a place I want to go to. I think there's enough bundled up, there's enough anxiety, and just purely cash resources and time as well that people have. So I think it is an incredibly bundled thing. So certainly Mike Berners-Lee in How Bad Are Bananas was able to persuade me that shipping, although it's not ideal, is better than air freight and possibly better than local inefficient storage. And so the third thing, any other comments or questions? No? Right, I'm going to move on. Locally grown tomatoes, again, very few, very low carbon. Tomatoes do tend to need a bit more help, so they tend to have to be started indoors and maybe require some warmth and so on. So they are bigger. They are a bigger absorber of greenhouse gases. And certainly English tomatoes that we will buy in the supermarket, although they're relatively low carbon, will probably not have been grown out of doors. They'll probably have been grown in some sort of protected environment, partly because of blight, because they're borderline they're not a native species, I don't think. They weren't really designed for this climate. so they're a bit borderline. Bananas, again, the same shipping arguments apply. Generally, bananas are grown in an environment which suits them. There are prices to be paid. I'm not sure how good mass banana production is. I'm not sure about the water use and the soil, and whether there are extra fertilizers. Generally, if you buy organic, then you are buying something which has non-nitrogenous fertilizers, so it will probably lower the associated greenhouse gases. So next were eggs. They're a relatively low carbon protein, if you like. So they're higher because we're looking at kilograms now, but they are a relatively low carbon source of protein. Rice is quite high because the paddy fields, the method of rice production, emits quite a lot of methane, and so that can surprise people. So rice is a slightly higher staple that does emit a lot of a relatively large amount of methane. Beef, everything about beef is tends to emit a lot of cause a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. It depends what sort of beef. So if you eat a beef burger, that's slightly lower because it needs less meat. I was slightly surprised at the figure for beef. I would have put it a little bit higher than that, but it's again, one of the problems slightly with this table is that if you're looking at portions, nobody would eat a kilogram of hard cheese, or so you've got a lot of stuff there. So you would proportionately use a smaller amount in a meal, if you like, than so if you had you maybe would have a 4-ounce or an 8-ounce steak. So that's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions for your protein, if you like. Again, shrimps are at the high end of what fish, what the emissions associated with fish. I think there are much lower. So fish like mackerel and I think are relatively low, but shrimps and prawns are very high. I think partly because of the amount of processing needed. Greenhouses out of season tomatoes are very, very high indeed. So if you were to buy a UK grown tomato in, I don't know, December, the chances are that the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that are high. If you do want tomatoes out of the UK seasonal window for locally grown tomatoes, then Spanish, because they require less infrastructure to produce them, even though they're transported here, and there are costs with transport, even though they're transported here, then it is still lower to have something which is grown locally and without too many inputs. And finally, hard cheese, partly because of the dairy that goes into it, and partly because it's stored for a long time. So a hard cheese is ripened over sometimes years, but certainly a long time. So as well as the inputs of dairy, you've also got the storage associated. So a fresh goat's cheese has a much lower, so a cheese that is made and consumed within a very short space of time is going to have a lower carbon footprint than a hard milk cheese, cow's milk cheese. Okay, any comments or questions, which I will do my best to answer, and if not, we can go to the next slide. Okay, this is just an indication of why it's complicated. There's probably no way of getting a vote on this one, but which is lower, tinned or dried chickpeas? I don't know if Mim can see anything in the chat, or I think most people would assume that it is the dried, and it is, because there are fewer embodied processes in the packaging, so there's less packaging, it's lighter to transport. You say you can transport more of it in the same vehicle. You only need maybe a cellophane bag or a sack or something to put them in, whereas a tin has a tin which requires a lot of manufacturing. It's much heavier and it's got water and so on in it. So it's a much bigger, more greenhouse gas emissions associated with a tin, unless and until you get them home. Then if you cook the chickpeas in water using fossil fuels, then the tinned chickpeas then are lower. If, on the other hand, you your cooking is powered by renewable energy and or dried chickpeas, I'm not sure that I'd want to do that. And you use a pressure cooker, then dried chickpeas are lower still. So these are the sorts of dilemmas, if you like, that you can get lost in. Under most chickpeas will anyway have a lower carbon footprint than beef and most animal proteins. But if you were trying to decide between tinned and dried, then the answer is it's complicated. Okay, next slide, please. And this is really my conclusion. What can we do? Reduce meat and dairy, particularly beef and cheese and lamb. Eat more plants. Eat seasonal local food. Eating seasonally and locally makes a huge difference. Again, it may be difficult to find seasonal and local food. If you can find a local veg bag or something like that, so if there are local vegetable bag schemes, then that will help, because everything that they have will be seasonal, and if they have bought stuff in, it will probably have been produced in this country, and if it has arrived from overseas, it will have arrived by ship, it won't have been air freighted. Generally processed food, because of the greenhouse gases emissions associated with the actual processing of the food, and the fact that there are often many, many more ingredients involved, usually means that the food is associated with a larger greenhouse carbon footprint. Okay, yes, sprouting them, good plan. So growing conditions are significant. Food miles are not always a good indicator of sustainability. So lettuce, on the whole, Spanish in winter, UK in summer. So field grown, transported short distances by road or ship, less perishable. Heated greenhouses, air freighted, fragile, spoils easily, and so wasted. So anything which doesn't last for a very long time is liable to have a higher carbon footprint. If it needs a particular temperature, if it's so unstable that it can only be transported in a chiller van or in chilled aeroplanes, then the carbon cost, if you like, is very high indeed. Okay, I think there's one more slide, but I think that's me done. Generally, a carbon-friendly diet is also a healthy diet as well.
Susan, do you want to say anything about this slide, or is this?
No, that was just me finishing off.
Oh, okay.
Carbon Oxford North have a lot of useful and interesting resources.
Brilliant. Okay, I think thank you very much. We're going to hand over to Anais now. So hopefully she is going to share her screen. Is that right?
Hello. Yes, hello. Hi everyone. Thank you, Susan. That was really, really interesting. Just to introduce myself briefly, my name's Anais. Oh, I've been pinned. God, no one wants to see themselves that closely. So I work for Community Action Groups Oxfordshire, which supports a network of community groups across Oxfordshire. I imagine that most of you know them because most of you are part of them. But as part of that, I also coordinate a project called Replenish, which focuses on supporting Oxfordshire residents to reduce their food waste and to compost at home. So I'm actually not going to share my screen. I'm just going to share some Google Slides in the chat here. So if people just want to click on that. Mostly, hang on, sorry, that's actually not working. 1 second. Technical hiccup. There we go. Can everyone just click on that and let me know once you're on?
What I could do, I could now share my screen and show that because I'm in there.
The reason you're welcome to, yeah, you're really welcome to, that's fine. You're going to have a couple of slides, that's why, and then we're just going to be editing the slides together. So that's
oh, okay.
It's just participatory, so yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So yeah. So firstly, so food waste might not be the sort of the first thing you think of when you think about sort of impacts of food on climate, but it does have quite a significant impact. I think that statistic that you might have heard, that if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd biggest emitter of greenhouse gases after the USA and China. Flashing picture is disturbing. Not sure what is flashing, but I'm going to carry on. Yeah, another thing that can be quite surprising is that actually most food waste in the UK at least happens at home. So if you don't include food waste that happens on the farm, and the reason we're not including that is because we actually don't really know the extent of it, then actually 70% of all other food waste does happen at home. I think the amount of waste that's produced by supermarkets is really low. It's possibly only sort of 2% of that food waste. So there's a lot that we can do as individuals in terms of having an impact there. Finally, the average person throws away around 210 pounds of food a year. So there's also a financial incentive to reduce food waste. So just on the next slide, this is just real basic. I'm sure you're sort of familiar with the waste hierarchy. So I think it's useful to think about the food waste hierarchy here. So sort of the biggest and sort of the best thing you can do is to reduce your food waste, of course. And then beyond that is composting the food waste that you do produce. And so we've got sort of more information about that on our website, and I'll share that afterwards. If you're not already composting and you want to be, then you can have a look at that. And lastly is recycling your food waste. So that's using your green food waste recycling caddy. I'll mention a little bit about what happens to that at the end, although I imagine I'm talking to a crowd who probably knows all about that. So won't go into too much detail. If you look at the next slide, food journey. So this is just kind of my way of thinking about food waste reduction. I think it's quite helpful to think about sort of what happens to your food between sort of buying it and throwing it in the bin. So if we think of 4 main stages, so shopping, so it might be the market, the supermarket, wherever you get your food, you might be growing it at home. Then you take it home, store it, fridge, cupboard, etc. The next thing you'll be doing is potentially planning your meals, or you might be doing that before you shop as well. Planning your meals and preparing it, and then serving it and eating it, and hopefully not binning it. So if we kind of use those 4 stages as a bit of a framework, I'm going to invite us to break into groups of about 3, I think. And each group is going to take one of these stages and think about what the reasons that food waste happens at each of these stages and what we can do at this stage to prevent food waste. So if we take the example of food shopping, what can we do to avoid food waste while shopping? I'd just invite, if anyone's got like 1 or 2 suggestions just to get the ball rolling, I would just really invite you to unmute yourself and shout it out.
plan your meals in advance and write a shopping list?
Write a shopping list, plan your meals in advance. Excellent. Okay, fantastic. I think that's plenty. That gives you an idea. I'm sure you'll all figure it out. So we'll go into groups and just spend about sort of 5 to 7 minutes maybe discussing that. So each slide has got a breakout room number on it, 1 to 8. So you're just gonna, once you're in your room, figure out which number you are, go to the slide, and you can all edit these slides. So if you've got ideas, just discuss them with your group, and then if you can just write them on the little post-its so that we've got with something to look at when we come back as a bigger group, that would be great. Okay, so any questions? So 5 minutes in your rooms with your group, just writing some ideas, and then we'll come back and discuss them a bit more as a group. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Mim, would you mind taking me off spotlight and just putting it on gallery view? That would be great. Actually, you know what? No, it's fine. Let's keep it on and we'll look at the screen as we go. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, I know that was brief, but I heard some really great ideas in my room. So we're just going to go through really quickly, and I'm just going to invite whoever was doing a particular slide just to tell us what you've got on it. You'll notice that there's only 4 stages and that there were 2 groups per stage because there are a lot of people on the session. So we'll just do the first one, and maybe the second one you'll have some things to add. And if there's anything that's the same, then if you can just leave it, that would be great. So food shopping, who was breakout room 1? Who wants to tell us what was on that slide? Talk us through it. Don't be shy. If you are shy, I can do it instead if you want. Okay.
Oh, I can do it if you want. So we discussed things like buying loose fruit and veg to avoid plastic. Although we did point out that in a pandemic, that does slow your food shop, which is a dangerous part of the week. Using refill shops is a great way of avoiding waste. Also shopping less and using what's in the cupboard/fridge. So maybe having a slightly larger stockpile of dried fruit, of dried stuff and canned stuff, and buying seasonal and local.
Actually, I think just the second last one, shopping less and using whatever you have in your house is quite good for avoiding waste, because we've been trying to go to the supermarket as infrequently as possible because of the pandemic. It actually means that we probably get through more of the food that we have in the house and less gets wasted as a result, which is quite good.
Great. Brilliant. Okay, thank you guys. Room 2, anything to add? Mim, would you mind moving on to that side? The same, food shopping, any more tips?
Yeah, yes. I think shop seasonally, don't shop when hungry. It's pretty much the same thing. If you are going to make a list, you should have a menu in mind. Otherwise, even if you make a list, it might not be particularly useful. Might just say buy more chocolate or something like that. That's a list.
Yeah.
I also try not to go to Waitrose because I just want to eat everything in Waitrose. Try to go to less attractive shops.
It's the wide aisles they get you, don't they? Just want to hang out in there all day. Yeah, and what was I going to? Oh yeah, and I guess also just checking. Maybe you said that already, but checking what you've got before you go, so that you know what's already in the cupboard, etc. Great. Next one, 3, food storage. So you've got it home, you've shopped really smartly. What are you going to do to make sure that you don't end up binning food at this point? Who was room 3?
We were in room 3.
Yeah.
We had lots of wild ideas, but we missed some rather obvious ones as well. But they've kind of been mentioned already. But obviously things like buying the right quantity, storing it correctly, freezing leftovers before they go off. What else is on there? Keeping a list of what food is stored in your house or in the freezer or whatever. Eating food obviously before it goes off, but I think somebody said that before it goes past its best before date.
Yeah, but even if it's beyond its
best before date, it's probably okay.
Just cut the mold off.
Using airtight containers. Yeah, that's sort of it really.
No, don't get bog offs.
Yeah, don't go buy one get one freeze. But that's more to do with shopping, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I mean, if you do get them, I guess just make sure that you're going to be able to eat them in time.
Exactly.
Or, I guess the same with use by dates, foods that are discounted, making sure that you're either going to eat them on that day or be able to save them for later. Great. Room 4, anything else to add to food storage? Store food in order of use. Yeah, great. So some people have like an eat me first shelf on their in their fridge so that people know to go there if they need to cook or snack. I guess that might be quite useful if you've got kids or teenagers. Temperature of your fridge and freezer. So this is really important. I think anyone who came to the last workshop may already know this, but most people keep their fridge at about 7 degrees. But if you turn it down to between sort of 2 and 4 degrees, your food will last a few days longer. So I know it's hard to know how hot your fridge is because the dial doesn't actually give you the temperature, but safe rule of thumb is just turning it right down. Yep. Keep bananas with tomatoes. I didn't know that, but the bananas shouldn't be kept with any other kind of fruit because they make them ripen more quickly. So unless you're trying to ripen fruit, then it's best to keep them away from there. Great. Okay. Next one. So you've been really great with the food storage. It's time to plan and prepare your meals. What are you going to do to make sure that you don't end up wasting food unnecessarily? Who was room 5? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. You can buy a thermometer for your fridge and freezer. That's a great suggestion. Who was room 5?
Yes. We were room 5. So yes, we thought contents of fridge, cough supper, just eat what's there rather than plan to a recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Eat all the food you've got, eat the skins and stalks and leaves. Don't throw bits that you don't like away. Cook 2 meals at a time, then you're using less heat. We weren't sure whether to think about heat because, as Julia pointed out, better to eat cold food if you're going to if you're going to cook it, you're going to use energy. But we were really talking about avoiding waste, but it's heat waste, isn't it? Like cooking. Don't overorder, use leftovers and being creative. Yeah, make up your own recipes. Don't rush out and buy some special ingredient when you think you need some saffron or something. And use the freezer when you've finished.
Great. Sorry, I'm just sending Min a really quick message. Fantastic. All right, thank you, Eleanor. That's great. And I love cough. That's a new abbreviation that I had never heard before. Okay, anyone else from room 6 got anything to add to what Eleanor said?
Where's Robin gone? Robin, you do it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hello. So we said things like writing a list before food shopping, as has been touched on, having a use me box in the front of the fridge to prompt you to use it, using up spare veg to make soup, or having a what's in the fridge for a tartar, making extra amounts and freezing them, but also allowing for flexibility within a meal plan so that if you've got leftovers to use up, you can actually have time to eat them, and kind of look in your cupboards and see what you've already got.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, and then the last one, so getting to the point of serving, eating your food, and that might include what you do, if you do anything with your leftovers, what you do with them. Who was in room 7?
I was part of room 7. We just talked about cooking the right size portion in the first place if you thought you were going to have food waste leftovers, and also maybe buying a smaller size of something from the supermarket if you didn't think you were going to get through it in the first place, but that might actually go under supermarket shopping. And then we went with eating leftovers for lunch the next day or repurposing them in another meal, making stock, and we also talked about freezing food. but we didn't write it down.
Great, thank you. That's fine. Okay, lovely. And the last group.
Oh yeah, I was in that one. We were kind of talking about how it's been particularly difficult, especially if you're shielding, because you don't have as much control about the food that comes in. But I think we both agreed that cooking 2 meals at once or 4 times as much and freezing for later is like the best way, especially if you're in a smaller household. I find it impossible just to cook 1 portion. So doubling up and freezing for later, and being slightly flexible with your use bys and using your common sense.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So yeah, lots of really great ideas there, and I think this sort of goes to show that we all kind of know all of the things that we should be doing to reduce our food waste, but sometimes it's not always possible to do all the right things. So what I would just invite you to do, Mim, if it's okay to put us in the same breakout rooms again for just 5 minutes, is that going to be doable?
I don't know if people will end up in the same ones, but
I think they will. If they don't, they'll meet someone else, and that'll be fine as well. So
okay.
I'm just great. Okay, so I'm just going to invite you to have a think about all of the behaviours that we've just discussed, and of those, just think, what would you like to do, and is there anything that you'd like to do but haven't been able to, and why? So because I think that often, like, the reasons that we waste food are really, really personal to our circumstances. So I think it's quite helpful to just think about our own lives in relation to this. So if we just take 5 minutes to just discuss those 2 questions with our partner, and then we'll come back at the end and move on to, I think, the break. Okay.
Oh, she's back. Yay.
Yeah. Sorry, I was having a nice chat with the person in my group. Okay. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. So that was, I appreciate that was very brief, and it's hard to get into sort of any amount of depth with that on such a broad topic. But I think, I think one of the main things that we can do is just to kind of observe the sorts of foods that we are throwing away and be paying attention to what might be happening there. And hopefully here we've sort of considered some of the reasons that might be happening. In the slides that I've shared with you, which you have, on slide 13, there are some resources. Thanks, Mim. So just some links there with a few extra ideas. There's this great A to Z of food storage, which tells you the best way to store everything, how to check the temperature of your fridge, depending on the type of fridge that you've got. There's a website called Love Food Hate Waste, which has got loads of recipes, including, if you've got a particular kind of leftover or one kind of ingredient that you need to use up, you can put it into there and it will give you some suggested recipes. Yes, I can send you the link again for the slides. And I've also just put a few tips on the next few slides if you want to, have a look at home after the session. Lastly, if anyone is interested in composting at home, then on the last slide, the very last slide, yes, there I've put a link to a compost guide that's on our website, so you can have a little, find out a bit more there. All right, thanks very much. I'll pass back to Mim, who I think might be sending us on a break.
Yep. So if everyone wants to take just a few minutes, so we don't actually have long until the end of the whole thing. So maybe if we could say that people are back in 3 minutes or so, if you can just run and get a drink or whatever you need to do, and then yeah, come back in about 3 minutes. Okay, cool. So yeah, feel free to turn off your video and disappear briefly and do what you need to do, and see you at 8:37 according to my clock. So hello, some people look like they're still not here, so maybe we'll give people another minute, stretch it all the way to 8:38.
Do the low carbon groups from the different areas liaise with one another, or just stay in touch with what the others are doing? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we do try to, and that's part of where the Communities for Zero Carbon came from, and also through CAG Oxfordshire, which is a kind of central information point for a lot of the groups. We liaise via that, and there are different working groups.
Remind me, please, what CAG is.
It's the community action groups.
Okay.
Anais, do you want to say anything about it briefly?
Yeah, yeah. So it's essentially a sort of network of the community groups across Oxfordshire that are running grassroots sustainability initiatives. I'll put in the chat in case anyone doesn't know of them and wants to have a look. There's a map of all of the groups on our website. A small staff team that is there to support the groups as well. Yeah, great. And yeah, so the Communities for Zero Carbon Oxfords, and most of those groups, if possibly all of them, are members as well.
Mm-hmm.
And are they linking into Oxford City in any way? You know, any initiatives that's going on there? You know, because
in terms of,
well, even the council has some links, doesn't it, to initiatives?
Yeah. Yeah, so we are funded by the county council, and we do work closely with them, and I know that many of the groups do work also with the city council, don't you? I think probably some of the people like Julia and Min might be able to comment on that.
Okay.
So I think we need to hit the road with the next bit. So I know that someone asked if the slides will be shared at the end, and they certainly will, and there will be a chance for a bit more discussion at the end. But I'm aware that we're heading towards 9 quite quickly. So Nina from Good Food Oxford, if you'd like to take over.
Absolutely, thanks. And give me a shout because we're a bit late, if you want me to stop at any point. I'll go with what I'd initially planned.
It's fine, yeah.
Right, so Good Food Oxford is a local food partnership which was launched in 2014. If you could start the slideshow, please. The basis of our work is the Oxford Good Food Charter, and it's our city and also our county's statement of a vision for a vibrant, healthy and sustainable food system for Oxfordshire. It covers several areas, including good food for the planet, for the people and the community. And it has suggestions on how to make a change. I'll come to that in a minute. So we're a cross-sector partnership. What that means is we have a network of network members from different sectors of the food system. If you could skip to the next slide. Our network has over 150 members. These are just a few of them. And it includes businesses, community groups, local authorities, some businesses and community groups who are present in this group today, which is really great to see. And you can see all of the network members on our website. I'll paste the link to that in the chat. The way to become a network member is quite simple. All of these network members have just signed the Good Food Charter and made a pledge for what they are doing to move Oxfordshire towards that vision in the charter. So they've all pledged specific actions to improve what they do with food, how they grow it, produce it, source it, cook and serve food. Let me put the link here, but that will also be shared later. Oops. Oh, it's not pasting. Okay, I'll do it later. Next slide, please. So we have 3 strategic priorities. Good food businesses, where we work with food businesses from producers to restaurants, cafes. Good food for all, which is around food access, food poverty, supporting the movement of community food services, but also on the political level, fighting poverty, because food poverty really is mostly just poverty. And third, changing our ways. That's the one I'll focus on for today in the next few minutes. So in terms of behavior change, reaching out to businesses, community groups, but also individuals on how to change what we eat and how we deal with food. Next slide. This is taken from the Good Food Charter, which suggests 5 simple things that we can all do to make the food we eat better for the planet, for people and community. And it covers some of the things we've already mentioned today, like eat more plants, waste less food, go for quality rather than quantity, cook more, and know your food means know your producers, know where it comes from, how it's transported, produced, who's produced it. And those priorities are all reflected in the work of our network members and also in the projects that we run as an organization. So I'll just pick 2 examples of those projects. Sorry, train passing. One is called Veg Places Oxfordshire, and the other is Oxfordshire Pumpkin Festival. So these are examples of how you might be able to get involved with our work if you like. Veg Places Oxfordshire, next slide, is a project that aims to get everyone to eat more vegetables. It's a very simple agenda. The one thing I think everyone can agree on, regardless of what diet they follow, is that everyone should be eating more vegetables. And one of the activities we do around that is teaching cooking skills. And we developed a teaching aid for that, for getting people to cook more, to eat more vegetables and reduce food waste. And that teaching aid is called the Good Food Cooking Toolkit. Next slide. And also, it's actually a physical resource, which we've not been able to hand out as much, obviously, because we've not had real life events, but that hopefully will start again soon. And it's basically a guide, a very short guide, much shorter than a cooking book and much more practical, that encourages people to put vegetables center stage. And it lends itself to cooking with anything that's available. So whether that's seasonal produce from the garden or a veg box, or surplus food that you get in a food parcel from a community fridge, or just anything that happens to be left at home. So that really links to what we heard earlier about not shopping to cook a specific recipe, but rather making up a recipe to use up what you have. That's exactly what the Good Food Cooking Toolkit is for. And to spread this work further and multiply cooking skills training, we are currently recruiting trainee cooking tutors. Next slide. And so what we're looking for is experienced cooks who may or may not have some experience with teaching, but who would like to learn more about teaching methods and improve their teaching skills, and then go on to teach community cooking classes. So we're offering free training with the expectations that the tutors will then continue to teach in their local community with that approach of encouraging eating more vegetables, reducing food waste, and working with what's available. So this links to a few of the 5 simple things. Next slide, please. On the charter, which you can look at in more detail on our website. And another project that we run every year and we're very busy with right now is Oxfordshire Pumpkin Festival. So you may be surprised that we're busy with that right now, right? Because it's not pumpkin season yet, but it's pumpkin growing season. So this year, for the first time, we run Pumpkin Festival Gets Growing by handing out squash seeds along with flyers supported by Replenish Oxfordshire and several other organizations, and encouraging people to grow more squashes and pumpkins and to grow the edible varieties rather than the tasteless ones that get carved and binned. So that again brings in a few of those messages around reducing food waste, growing more food locally, growing more veg and eating more veg, and bringing together people, building community around growing and eating food. I'll stop here. If you have questions about those, we can have those at the end. And basically next steps, or what you can do in terms of Good Food Oxford, is to stay in touch by signing up for our newsletter, following us on social media, posting on our social media, download resources on our website, such as the Good Food Cooking Toolkit. Get in touch if you'd like hard copies of that for your group, and be in touch if you have any other ideas for what we could do together.
Thank you, Nina. Okay, I'm just going to say very quickly a little bit about what we've been doing at Low Carbon West Oxford.
Nice.
So a couple of things. We did a Beat the Waste food festival. We did the first one in 2017, and then we did another one in 2018, and we were hoping to do it again in 2020, but for some reason we couldn't. But hopefully one day again in the future we will run a food festival that focuses on waste. So for example, as part of that, we had a Ready Steady Cook where various chefs, including Ruth, who you'll meet in a minute, cooked up delicious food from food at the Oxford Food Bank, which would have otherwise gone to waste. And we also have vegan or veg-based cake competitions, which everyone's very keen to be on the judging panel for that. And another thing that we're doing, which is actually happening at the moment, is we got apples from across West Oxford. We asked people to give us their apples, and we have created our very own local apple juice. And we're also putting together a guide about how communities can do that, because that's a really easy thing to do. And Tiddly Poms, who made the apple juice, run by Rupert, he's very keen. He's very happy to work with community groups and pick up apples and all sorts of stuff and make your own apple juice. On top of that, we are working with various supermarkets. There's a jam jar bank at Hogacre, and obviously them running workshops like this. And then I wanted to invite Ruth Lister, who is the school cook from West Oxford Primary. They're very lucky to have a proper school cook. And here we are. I'm going to spotlight her, and she's just going to tell us about a cookery class pilot that we that Low Carbon West Oxford helped to fund. So Ruth, over to you.
Yes, hello, good evening. Yes, I've been cooking at West Oxford Primary School now for the last 15 years, and over the years obviously I've become more and more interested into making sure that we are also becoming more low carbon and improving things with the school food. And sort of with that, I've started to cook more vegetarian food, and we've stopped calling the vegetarian food. It's just the other food. So we've got food 1 or food 2 to choose from. So to become more normal to have vegetarian meals, for example. But with that, it became also more and more clear that a lot of the children don't really participate in cooking at home. Food at home is very often cooked quickly, and a lot of parents are working now. So what I've noticed at school, for example, that many of the little children don't like potatoes. And I think part of the reason is they don't get many potatoes because potatoes take a long time to cook, and you have to plan a meal with potatoes. Whereas if you just cook pasta, it's much quicker. So one of those things that shows really that to learn the skill of cooking is really important, and that is so far not really possible at a primary school. And I thought that it might be possible to do it in the afternoon in small groups for the older children, and I've with the help of Low Carbon West Oxford, I started 1.5 years ago to do that with that year 6 of that year. And so we managed to get 2 terms in before, unfortunately, all the lockdown things happened. And so I took, at the time, 5 or 6 children. First of all, we were going to take some shopping, and we did that, and we visited different shops. It was meant to run over the whole year, and so each child would have 5 different cooking lessons and would go to 5 different shops. The shops would have been a couple of supermarkets, the food bank, and the market. And then would have a cooking lesson in which they would learn basic to cook basic things, and each of the lesson would have a kind of different theme. So in one lesson they would, for example, do a tomato sauce, they would do a bechamel sauce, they would cook pasta in that case, they would make roast vegetables. And so all the food we were cooking was vegetarian food, and it was not really puddings, because I thought if parents cook with children, usually they make cakes or they make biscuits. So what I wanted them to learn is to actually learn to use cooking tools like a proper knife, for example, and to cook savory food and basic food which they could then add to and they could combine the things. And at the same time, they were going to learn a bit about food hygiene, and certainly also about food waste and about recycling, for example. Yeah, I mean, as said, with actually help of Nina, who you saw earlier, we did quite a few of those lessons, and the children really, really enjoyed it. And actually at the end of the year, even though we didn't manage to get all the cooking lessons in, that year 6 actually made a book about their cooking experiences and basically put their favorite recipes into that. So hopefully we will be able to do that again as soon as school returns to normal. And I mean, I can only say, seeing how many children at the moment are eating, and we have even more children eating school food since they've come back from lockdown, it shows how much the children appreciate to have nice food to eat. And also it shows how parents are quite glad that their children are back in school and they get a proper warm meal, and they don't have to do it at home anymore. But yeah, I mean, just trying to think what else to say. Yeah, I'm hoping very much that we can go back to that, and sort of that next September, with any luck, we can start those cooking lessons again with the next year 6, and that this time around it will actually work out for the whole year rather than just for a few lessons. So if there's any questions or so, please ask.
Thank you, Ruth. I think certainly from my perspective, it's a really inspiring project, and I think that school's really lucky to have you and for those kids to have that opportunity. I guess from a low carbon West Oxford perspective, I'm really interested in what we could learn from it and what we could say about it that might inspire other schools to do the same. And make it possible for them to do the same, even if they don't have their own chef in the way that West Oxford does. I think we're going to go into questions properly now. I'm aware that we're coming up. Okay, we've got a few more minutes, and I'm going to stop screen share for the questions. I just want to say thank you to all the speakers so that people feel free to leave when they need to leave. But thank you to the 4 of you. And also to let people know that we've got one more event in this series coming up, which is about improving your home to use less energy. And that's going to be on the 19th of May. And hopefully it will rain and be horrible, and so you'll feel like joining us. I am going to stop the screen share. And so there's a few questions in the... No chats? No questions in the chats? Maybe there are. Oh yeah, some people saying nice things about Ruth. Yeah, too bad. So I guess if people have questions, if you want to just raise your hand or unmute yourself or whatever for any of the four speakers, then please do. Roger?
For the first speaker, are there any sort of well-known alternatives to rice as far as lower carbon carbs, so to speak?
I think things like pasta is relatively low carbon. Potatoes, particularly locally grown. I mean, we grow a lot of potatoes in this country. I'm trying to think other grains. I think quinoa. I think that's quite low, and I think we can grow it in this country.
Millet also.
Okay, sorry.
Millet also.
Sorry, Nina.
Millets also. Are not usually grown here, but could be.
Pearl barley, is that quite good?
Yes, yeah, oats are fabulous.
Okay.
Pumpkins.
Pearl barley's horrible. So
Oh, pearl
I like
barley's
pearl barley.
lovely. Oh,
you can
we'll
convince
change
me.
your mind.
Yeah. Good
When you
luck.
invite her out for dinner, we're gonna have pearl barley.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. So if we're being encouraged to eat less dairy, what about you then kind of people switch to dairy-free alternatives, but they're also quite bad for the environment, right? You know, is switching from milk to cow's milk to a dairy-free milk a good idea? So we eat quite a lot of yogurt. I'm not confident that coconut yogurt would be as healthy for you or as good for the environment.
I would like to agree with Anais. Oat milk, I think, is because oats are locally grown. I think other milks like almond milk and soy milk do come freighted, I think, with some issues.
I think almond milk is particularly devastating in terms of environmental footprint.
I think the water consumption, water use in California is pretty much broken. There's a lot of almond milk comes from there. But oat milk, I think, I know that Handlebar in the city centre use oat milk by default in their coffees now. So yeah, try oat milk.
I asked about tofu, which I don't think has been mentioned.
What did you say?
Tofu?
Tofu? Anyone want to say something about tofu?
I eat an awful lot of it, but I have no idea about its carbon footprint.
I guess the general rule of thumb I would recommend is to just ensure that things are organic, and the more, especially the further away they are grown. So buying, buying tofu that is made from soybeans grown in Europe, I think it's probably similar to buying any other beans. But buying non-organic GMO soy from South America may not be such a great idea. So it's always about the details of where things are from and how they're produced.
Yeah.
I've read somewhere that it's still better than eating meat, I think. Like, yeah, it's
a bit
so
like,
even,
but it's a bit like shifting from a car to an electric car. Sure, it's a little bit better, but it's also about questioning the how much of we need to consume.
I think
And
quite a lot of deforestation associated with soy production.
If it's not grown in Europe.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I would only ever buy organic. I buy everything organic. So I don't think there's any deforestation involved.
I can't answer that. It would be on a case-by-case basis, depending where it's from. But
yeah, I don't think it means no deforestation.
I'm sure it does, because I've read that somewhere. But we'll check it if nobody knows.
Yeah, I'll check that.
It'd be interesting to have it included in the list of food.
Yeah, actually, Helen makes an important point here. I don't think anyone eating tofu needs to really worry about the impact of their soy compared to the impact of the animal industry on soy production. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question. Any last questions? Or should we leave it there?
Thanks, very interesting evening.
Yeah, thank you to all our speakers, and I will circulate the slides and notes from that. And if you have any questions for any of the speakers that come to mind afterwards, then just drop me a line and I'll put you in touch. And hopefully see some of you in May at the. Julia, do you want to say anything about the Homes event, or I'm putting you slightly on the spot?
Yeah, we can just, no, that's fine. I think just to mention, so it's an event a little bit like this one on home energy, and the idea is that we'll have a couple of case studies, so people who've done a range of retrofit measures in their homes will tell us a little bit about that, and we'll also have experts there who can give us the overview and the sort of the bigger holistic picture, if you like, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, etc. So we hope that will be of interest to people as well.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.